My friends, let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to have them betray you in the cruelest way? Imagine a millionaire husband shoving his pregnant wife at a glamorous party. But wait, her savior was her Navy SEAL brother. Stay with me, trust me, you don't want to miss this. Please, like, share, and subscribe. The music was loud, the lights shimmered across the sparkling surface of the infinity pool, and laughter echoed from every corner of the luxurious mansion. Guests dressed in designer outfits sipped champagne, snapping photos for social media, eager to prove they belonged at the party of the season. The night seemed perfect, at least for everyone else. At the far edge of the poolside terrace, the young woman stood quietly, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her swollen belly. Her name was Elena Carter, and she was 6 months pregnant. She wore a pale blue maternity dress, simple but graceful, nothing like the glittering gowns surrounding her. She should have been glowing with joy, preparing to welcome her first child. Instead, she stood in the middle of her husband's world, a world where she never truly belonged. Her husband, Marcus Carter, was a millionaire real estate mogul, tall, broad-shouldered, always in the spotlight. Tonight, he was dressed in an ivory tuxedo, his laughter booming as he entertained investors and flirted with women who weren't his wife. Elena watched from the sidelines, her heart aching with every fake smile he flashed. He hadn't touched her hand all evening. He hadn't even introduced her as his wife to half the guests. The humiliation had become unbearable. But Elena stayed. She stayed because she believed marriage was worth saving, because she believed Marcus might still care, and most of all, because of the tiny life inside her. But everything changed in an instant. Marcus's mistress, a striking brunette named Vanessa Steele, slithered toward Elena, her red satin dress clinging to every curve. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Well," Vanessa purred loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "don't you look out of place? That dress, is it from last season's bargain rack?" The group around her laughed. Elena's cheeks flushed, but she bit her tongue. She wanted to walk away, to keep the peace. But Vanessa wasn't finished. "You know, Marcus deserves a woman who fits into this world," she sneered, tilting her glass of champagne toward Elena's belly. "Not someone who waddles around like a charity case." The cruel remark drew gasps, a few stifled chuckles. Elena's eyes burned, but she whispered softly, "I am his wife." The words seemed to ignite Marcus. He strode over, his face twisted with irritation. "Enough." He snapped, not at Vanessa, but at Elena. "Why must you always embarrass me? Can't you just keep quiet for once?" Elena's lips trembled. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't fought back. She had simply reminded them who she was. Yet Marcus treated her like the problem. And then it happened. Marcus's hand shot out, gripping Elena's arm. With a sudden shove, he pushed her backward toward the pool. Her cry pierced the air as her body stumbled, balance faltering, her pregnant belly making it impossible to catch herself. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Time slowed. Elena's arms flailed, her eyes wide with terror as she tipped dangerously close to the edge. The glittering water awaited her. And then, strong arms caught her. A figure burst through the crowd, moving faster than anyone could process. He grabbed Elena before she hit the water, pulling her to safety with a precision that stunned everyone watching. The crowd erupted into whispers, phones flashing as cameras captured every second. Elena blinked through tears, struggling to breathe. She looked up at the man who had saved her and froze. It wasn't just a lifeguard. It was her older brother, Jack Lawson. 6 years older than Elena, Jack had once been her childhood protector before life and the Navy had taken him away. He was tall, muscular, his short hair damp with sweat, his sharp eyes scanning Marcus with a deadly calm. Jack wasn't just a brother. He was a former Navy SEAL, trained for life-or-death situations. Tonight, he wasn't just a guest. He was the one person Marcus never expected, and the last person he should have crossed. The crowd buzzed with tension. Some whispered in shock, others recorded eagerly, sensing the scandal unfolding before their eyes. Marcus's smirk faltered as Jack gently set Elena on her feet, shielding her with his body. "You shoved a pregnant woman." Jack's voice was low, dangerous, steady as steel. "You shoved my sister." Marcus scoffed, trying to laugh it off. It was nothing. She tripped. Everyone saw it. But nobody believed him. Cameras had captured everything. The image of Marcus Carter, the millionaire golden boy, pushing his own wife toward the pool while his mistress watched with delight, was already spreading across social media. Elena clung to Jack's arm, her tears mixing with relief and humiliation. The man she trusted most had tried to destroy her, and the brother she hadn't seen in years had been the one to save her. Around them, the glamorous party had shifted into chaos. Investors whispered, reporters typed furiously on their phones, and Vanessa's mocking smile had vanished, replaced with nervous silence. And then, Jack stepped closer to Marcus. His voice dropped to a tone only a Navy SEAL could muster, one that made the millionaire's bravado crumble. "You ever touch her again," Jack said, his eyes locking on Marcus's, "and you'll regret it." The music still played in the background, but the night had changed forever. Elena wasn't just the silent wife anymore. She was the center of a scandal that would soon shake Marcus's empire to the core. And with her brother by her side, she wasn't as powerless as everyone thought. Because this was only the beginning. Elena Carter had never been the kind of woman who craved the spotlight. She grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, living in a modest two-bedroom house that always smelled faintly of motor oil and fresh-baked bread. Life was simple, sometimes hard, but filled with warmth. She was the kind of girl who found joy in sketching by the window, who saved her allowance for second-hand novels, who dreamed of love as something steady and kind, not flashy or cruel. From the time she was little, Elena believed family was everything. She believed in loyalty, sacrifice, and promises kept. Those values were etched into her heart the night her older brother Jack enlisted in the Navy. She was only 14 then, clinging to him as though letting go would break her world apart. Jack promised her he'd always protect her, no matter how far away he was. And for years, his letters came, short, scribbled notes from far-off bases, words that reminded her she wasn't alone. But life moved on. She studied graphic design at a community college, worked part-time at a coffee shop, and slowly built a small life for herself. She never had much, but she was content. That was when she met Marcus Carter. He walked into the coffee shop one afternoon like he owned the world. Polished shoes, expensive watch, the kind of swagger that made everyone notice. He ordered an Americano, then stayed for hours, claiming he needed a quiet place to work. But Elena noticed the way his eyes kept drifting toward her, how his compliments slipped into their small talk. Marcus was magnetic. He told her she was beautiful when she was still wearing her apron with coffee stains on it. He said she had a quiet elegance, something rare and priceless. For a girl who had spent her whole life in the shadows, his attention felt like sunlight. Against her better judgment, she fell for him. Their whirlwind romance moved fast. Marcus showered her with gifts she'd never imagined, designer handbags, weekend trips, candlelit dinners at places she didn't even know existed. He made promises, whispered that she would never have to struggle again. When he proposed, Elena believed she was stepping into her own fairy tale. At first, marriage seemed like a dream. They lived in a sprawling mansion with glass walls overlooking the city. Elena traded her old car for a sleek SUV Marcus insisted she deserved. She thought she had found safety, security, and love all wrapped into one. But it didn't take long for cracks to show. Marcus was charming in public, but behind closed doors, he grew colder. His career consumed him, and his ambition left little room for tenderness. He began to mock Elena for her simplicity, her inexpensive clothes, her lack of connections, her quiet voice at high society events. She tried harder, wore the dresses he bought her, smiled through the gossip, and silenced her own discomfort. When she became pregnant, Elena hoped everything would change. She thought the child would soften Marcus, bring them closer, remind him of the love that had once existed. For a brief moment, it seemed true. Marcus bought baby clothes, took her hand at doctor's appointments, and spoke about the future. But soon, his excitement faded. He began staying out late, attending parties without her, showing up in photos with Vanessa Steele, the woman everyone whispered about. Elena tried to ignore the rumors, clinging to the belief that love could be salvaged. She stayed quiet, hoping silence would keep her marriage intact. Yet inside, she was unraveling. Pregnancy was hard enough, the morning sickness, the swollen ankles, the endless fatigue. But carrying those struggles alone while your husband flirted with another woman was unbearable. Elena often cried in the nursery at night, sitting in the rocking chair meant for her baby, whispering promises to the child inside her. "You will never feel unloved," she vowed softly. "Not the way I do." Still, she tried to present the image of a dutiful wife. She told herself she was staying for the baby, that Marcus would one day see her worth again. But the truth was harsher. She had become invisible to the man who once claimed she was everything. The poolside party was only the latest humiliation in a string of many. And though Elena had spent years shrinking herself to fit into Marcus's world, she didn't realize that night would be the breaking point, the moment her life would split into before and after. Because when Marcus shoved her, when his hand turned cruel in front of everyone, the illusion shattered. It wasn't just about being unloved anymore. It was about survival. For her, for her baby, for the dignity she had nearly lost. And when her brother Jack appeared, when his arms pulled her back from the water's edge, it was as though fate itself had stepped in. For years, she thought she had no one. But Jack's sudden return reminded her of something she had forgotten. She wasn't powerless. She had family. She had strength buried deep inside. The girl who once lived quietly in her parents' house, who thought love was about sacrifice and silence, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had seen the mask ripped from her husband's face. And for the first time, Elena began to wonder if she could rise again, not just as Marcus's discarded wife, but as a mother, a sister, and a woman with her own fire. Because in that moment, one truth became painfully clear. Marcus Carter had created his own worst enemy, the woman he thought he could break. The Carter mansion had been built to impress, and tonight it lived up to its purpose. From the gated driveway where valets ushered in Lamborghinis and Rolls-Royces, to the sprawling terrace that wrapped around the turquoise infinity pool, every inch of the estate screamed wealth. Chandeliers imported from Italy glimmered over the outdoor bar. White roses floated in glass bowls across tables draped in silk. A DJ spun tracks beside the pool, while servers in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne that never seemed to run out. It was the kind of night designed for headlines, and Marcus Carter wanted nothing less. Boasting the most exclusive poolside party of the summer was his way of cementing his image as a man of power, influence, and endless charm. Investors, celebrities, models, and politicians brushed shoulders beneath the palm trees, every smile carefully staged for cameras. But for Elena, the glamour was suffocating. She stood near the pool's edge, feeling as though the music was miles away. The guests shimmered with sequined gowns and sharp tuxedos, their laughter rising like smoke into the warm night air. Elena wore the soft blue dress she had chosen herself, one she thought was elegant but modest. Compared to the glittering women around her, she felt like a shadow in her own home. Her hand rested protectively over her belly as she scanned the crowd for Marcus. He was never hard to find, always in the center, surrounded by admirers. And there he was now, across the terrace, leaning close to Vanessa Steele. Elena's stomach tightened as she watched Vanessa lay a manicured hand on Marcus's arm, laughing a little too loudly, leaning a little too close. Elena swallowed her pride, telling herself she wouldn't cause a scene. She had promised herself countless times that she would keep the peace, that she wouldn't let her emotions embarrass him in public. But humiliation had a way of creeping in, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. She overheard snippets of conversation as guests passed by. Marcus really knows how to throw a party. Who's the woman in the blue dress? Oh, that's his wife? Doesn't look like she belongs here. She looks so plain. Vanessa's the one who matches his world. Each comment sliced through Elena like glass. She forced herself to breathe, to stand tall, to keep her eyes on the glowing pool, rather than the whispers curling behind her back. The music swelled, and the night deepened, the scent of champagne mixed with chlorine and jasmine. Waiters passed by with trays of lobster canapés, but Elena couldn't bring herself to eat. Her nerves twisted too tightly. She felt both exposed and invisible, seen enough to be mocked, ignored enough to be forgotten. She remembered when she and Marcus first moved into this house. He had promised her the pool parties would be theirs, nights filled with love and laughter. She had imagined evenings where she could rest her head on his shoulder while they watched the city lights shimmer in the distance. Instead, the pool had become his stage, and she his unwanted prop. As Marcus raised a glass to toast a group of investors, Vanessa slid beside him, her red dress glowing under the lights like a flame. Elena watched him drape an arm over Vanessa's chair, the gesture casual but intimate. For the world, it was entertainment. For Elena, it was betrayal. Again and again, in front of everyone. Her baby kicked softly, reminding her that she wasn't alone. She whispered under her breath, "I'm still here. I'm still your mother." She moved away from the crowd, closer to the water, seeking a sliver of calm. The pool sparkled with thousands of lights embedded along the edges, the reflection of the stars dancing across the surface. Somewhere inside the house, music shifted into a slower rhythm. Couples swayed together while photographers snapped pictures. But Elena stood apart, more a spectator than a wife. As the night dragged on, Marcus finally noticed her, or rather noticed her absence from his orbit. He strode across the terrace with Vanessa lingering close behind him. His smile was tight, his voice sharp. "What are you doing over here?" he demanded, though his words were softened with a fake charm for the guests within earshot. "I needed some air," Elena answered quietly, her fingers tightening over her belly. Marcus sighed dramatically. "You're supposed to mingle, Elena. People notice when you hide away like this. Do you know how it makes me look?" Elena's heart sank. It wasn't about her feelings. It was about his image. Always his image. Before she could respond, Vanessa's voice cut in, dripping with venom. "She's not hiding, Marcus. She's just uncomfortable. This isn't really her scene, is it?" A ripple of laughter rose from those nearby, as though Vanessa's cruelty was entertainment. Elena felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the words lodged in her throat. Marcus leaned in, his whisper a dagger. "Just smile and behave, Elena. That's all I ask. Don't ruin this for me." Her eyes stung. Behave, as though she were a child, as though her silence was her only worth. The night's beauty blurred into something bitter. The shimmering pool, the glittering gowns, the expensive champagne, all of it felt hollow, a cage she couldn't escape. The laughter around her no longer sounded like music, but like jeers, echoes of a world where she would never belong. And deep down, Elena realized something she had been denying for months. This wasn't just about Vanessa or Marcus's betrayal. It was about the life she had given up, the woman she had buried inside herself just to stand by his side. The pool sparkled, reflecting the fractured pieces of a life that looked perfect on the outside, but was cracking at its core. The party roared on, oblivious. Cameras flashed, toasts were made, and Marcus basked in the glow of admiration. But Elena's chest tightened with a silent scream. Something was coming, something she couldn't stop. Because sometimes it only takes one cruel moment in a glittering night for the mask to fall away. And that moment was closer than anyone imagined. Marcus Carter was the kind of man people either envied or feared. To the outside world, he was the self-made millionaire, the charming host, the man who could close billion-dollar real estate deals with a smile. His face appeared in magazines, his name trended on financial blogs, and his charisma lit up every gala he attended. But behind the flash of cameras and the curated image was a man who believed love was a transaction, loyalty a weakness, and people, especially women, were tools to be used and discarded. Elena had once thought his confidence was strength. Now she saw it for what it truly was, arrogance laced with cruelty. The party was Marcus's playground. He thrived on the admiration, the whispered envy, the constant validation. When he walked through the crowd, people parted as though he were royalty. He lived for that power, and nothing and no one was allowed to dull his shine. Not even his pregnant wife. Vanessa Steele knew this about him, and she knew how to use it. She was everything Elena wasn't. Bold, glamorous, and unafraid to demand attention. Her long red dress shimmered like fire under the lights, her laughter echoing across the terrace. To Marcus, Vanessa was exciting, a symbol of the youth and luxury he craved. To Vanessa, Marcus was a ticket to the world she'd always wanted, a world of wealth, power, and notoriety. Together, they made a cruel pair. "Marcus," Vanessa whispered as they leaned against the marble bar, her eyes flicking toward Elena, standing near the pool. She looks so lost. Honestly, it's embarrassing. People are starting to notice. Marcus followed her gaze. His jaw tightened. "She's supposed to be mingling. She knows better." Vanessa smirked. "Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, but if you want to keep climbing, Marcus, you can't let her drag you down." Investors don't want to see weakness. They don't want a wife who looks ordinary. The venom in her voice dripped like poison. But Marcus didn't defend Elena. He didn't remind Vanessa that Elena was his wife, the mother of his child. Instead, he nodded as if Vanessa's words were gospel. "She'll learn," he said coldly. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, with the detached tone of a man talking about an employee who wasn't performing well. To Marcus, Elena was no longer a partner. She was a liability. Later in the evening, when a group of investors approached, Vanessa clung to Marcus's arm like she belonged there, her smile dazzling. Elena watched from across the terrace, her throat tight, as Marcus introduced Vanessa by name. Charming, flattering, almost as though she were his wife instead. Elena's stomach turned as she realized he hadn't once bothered to introduce her that night. And Vanessa thrived in that spotlight. She leaned close, whispered jokes in Marcus's ear, touched his arm with calculated intimacy. Every gesture was a performance, one Elena couldn't ignore. Guests whispered, phones discreetly snapped photos, and still Marcus didn't care. Vanessa waited until Elena came closer, then delivered the cruelest blow yet. "You must be exhausted," Vanessa said with mock concern, her eyes dropping deliberately to Elena's pregnant belly. "Carrying all that weight around, while Marcus carries the weight of an empire." A ripple of laughter spread through the group. Elena's chest burned with humiliation, her eyes stinging. She wanted to turn and walk away, but Vanessa wasn't finished. "Honestly, Marcus," Vanessa continued with a sly smile, "she doesn't really fit this world anymore, does she?" Elena froze. The world? It was as if Vanessa was declaring in front of everyone that Elena was an outsider in her own marriage, her own home. Marcus's silence was louder than any defense. He didn't protest. He didn't correct Vanessa. He simply sipped his champagne, a smirk tugging at his lips. The message was clear. Vanessa was right. For Elena, the realization was devastating. She had given up everything, her career, her independence, her peace of mind, for this man. And now, in front of everyone, he allowed another woman to reduce her to nothing. But Marcus wasn't finished proving his cruelty. As the night wore on, he grew bolder. He laughed with Vanessa, touched her waist as though Elena didn't exist, and flaunted his disregard openly. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering about his audacity, others waiting to see how far he would go. And Marcus went further. When Elena finally mustered the courage to approach him, to gently remind him she was still there, still his wife, Marcus turned on her with a venom she had never seen in public before. "Stop hovering," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw attention. "Why can't you just stand there and look pretty, Elena? Do you have any idea how hard I work to keep this image, and you?" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like poison. Elena's face burned as the crowd murmured, as Vanessa's smile widened into triumph. For Marcus, it wasn't enough to ignore her. He had to belittle her, to strip her dignity piece by piece until nothing remained. And in that moment, Vanessa leaned closer, whispering just loud enough for Elena to hear. "Maybe one day he'll finally realize you were just a placeholder." The cruelty cut deeper than any knife. Elena felt her knees weaken, her grip tightening over her belly as though to shield her child from the venom surrounding her. But Marcus, drunk on pride and power, wasn't done yet. His voice dropped into a mocking tone, laced with disdain. "Maybe if you acted more like a wife and less like dead weight, we wouldn't be having this problem." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Even those accustomed to scandals were unsettled by the open cruelty. But Marcus didn't care. He never cared. He looked at Elena not with love, not even with anger, but with the cold detachment of a man who had already discarded her in his mind. "And Vanessa?" She smiled, as though victory was hers, as though Elena's pain was nothing more than entertainment. The night had reached its boiling point. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the heartless man Marcus truly was, and the mistress who encouraged his every cruelty. But what neither of them realized was that they had pushed Elena to her limit, and the moment that would destroy Marcus's carefully crafted empire was only seconds away. Because humiliation has a breaking point, and Elena's breaking point was about to arrive. The night had grown thicker, the party louder. The pool shimmered beneath strings of golden lights, and the air buzzed with the hum of laughter, music, and whispered gossip. Marcus Carter, glass of champagne in hand, was in his element, while Elena felt as though the ground beneath her feet was cracking. She had spent the entire evening enduring the ridicule, swallowing the sting of Vanessa's barbed remarks, and pretending not to hear the cruel whispers of strangers. But the breaking point came when Marcus paraded Vanessa through the crowd as though she were the queen of the night, leaving Elena to stand alone near the pool's edge. She couldn't take it anymore. Gathering her courage, Elena walked toward him. Her steps were careful, protective of the life growing inside her, but her heart pounded with determination. She would not let herself be erased. She would not let Vanessa take her place in front of the very world that once celebrated her as Marcus's wife. The moment she reached him, she laid a trembling hand on his arm. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I am your wife. Don't forget that." The words hung in the air. Some nearby guests turned their heads, curiosity flashing in their eyes. Cameras rose discreetly, ready to capture the drama that was unfolding. Marcus's jaw tightened, his smile faltering. He hated being challenged, especially in public. He leaned close, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Not here, Elena. Not tonight." But she didn't back down. For the first time in months, she looked him in the eye, her hand firm against his arm. "Then when, Marcus? When will you remember who I am? When will you stop pretending I don't exist?" The murmurs grew louder. A circle of spectators formed, pretending to sip their drinks while watching intently. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, as though she had orchestrated the entire scene. Marcus's temper snapped. "You don't belong here," he hissed, his voice rising above the music. "You're a burden, Elena. Do you understand? You're dragging me down. Look at you, standing here pathetic, clinging to me while I try to build something greater. Why can't you just stay quiet and let me live?" Gasps erupted. Phones lifted higher. The image of Marcus Carter, the glamorous millionaire tearing down his pregnant wife in front of a crowd, was seared into every witness's mind. Elena's lips trembled. The humiliation cut deeper than any blade, but still she held his gaze. "I am your wife," she repeated, her voice breaking but strong enough to carry. Something dark flickered in Marcus's eyes, rage mixed with fear. The crowd, the cameras, the whispers closing in. He needed to assert control, to show everyone he was untouchable. And then, without warning, his hand shot out. He shoved her. The motion was swift, violent, and utterly shocking. Elena's body stumbled backward, her arms flailing as the world tilted around her. Her heart lurched, terror crashing through her as her swollen belly pulled her off balance. The crowd gasped in unison. A woman screamed. A phone clattered to the ground as someone fumbled to catch the scene. Elena's foot slipped against the wet tile of the pool's edge. She felt her body tipping, the shimmering water rising toward her, the sound of the party fading into a dull roar. For a split second, all she could think was, "My baby." Time slowed. She saw Marcus's face twisted in anger, Vanessa's lips curved into a cruel smirk, the blur of horrified expressions from strangers who did nothing but watch. And then, arms wrapped around her. Strong, steady, unshakable. She was yanked back from the edge of disaster, pulled against a chest she hadn't leaned on in years. Her body trembled as air rushed back into her lungs. Elena blinked through tears, her vision clearing, and saw him, Jack Lawson, her brother. The lifeguard no one expected. The man who had once tucked her into bed after their father's late-night shifts, who had written her letters from war zones, who had promised her he would always protect her, even from oceans away. Now, here he was, holding her as though she were still his little sister, shielding her from the man who had just tried to destroy her. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Phones captured every angle, flashes of light searing the scene into permanence. The story was no longer just whispered gossip, it was evidence, recorded, undeniable. Marcus's face paled. He hadn't expected anyone to intervene, least of all Jack. He took a step forward, trying to mask his panic with arrogance. "She tripped," he barked. "Everyone saw it. It wasn't me." But no one believed him. Not with cameras rolling, not with dozens of witnesses frozen in disbelief. Jack set Elena gently on her feet, his arms still firm around her shoulders. His eyes locked onto Marcus's with the cold, unwavering gaze of a soldier who had stared down enemies more dangerous than him. "You shoved a pregnant woman," Jack said, his voice low but carrying like thunder. "You shoved my sister." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Even the music seemed to falter, the DJ unsure whether to keep playing. Marcus tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow, brittle. "You don't understand. She was in the way. She's always in the way." The words only made it worse. Gasps turned into mutters, mutters into judgment. His empire of charm was crumbling before his eyes. Helena clung to Jack, her tears streaming freely now, not from weakness but from the shock of realizing she had nearly lost everything, her dignity, her baby, her life. But she wasn't alone anymore. Jack's grip tightened as he stepped forward, placing himself between Helena and Marcus. His presence was unshakable, his authority undeniable. He wasn't just her brother tonight. He was her protector, her shield, the one man Marcus could never intimidate. The crowd watched, breathless. Investors, socialites, strangers, all witnessing the fall of Marcus Carter in real time. And in that moment, Helena realized something that made her heart pound with new strength. The man who had spent years belittling her, ignoring her, and finally shoving her, had just destroyed his own empire. Not with a failed deal, but with a single act of cruelty. And the night was far from over, because Jack wasn't done, and neither was Helena. The party had dissolved into chaos after the shove. What was once a glamorous poolside soiree had turned into a scandalous spectacle. Guests whispered in tight circles, phones buzzed as videos were uploaded in real time, and the Carter name, once synonymous with success, was now plastered across screens in shame. But for Helena, none of that mattered. She wasn't thinking about investors, or gossip, or Marcus's unraveling empire. She was thinking about the trembling inside her body, the pounding of her heart, and the life growing within her. Her brother Jack had guided her away from the terrace, shielding her from the eyes and the cameras, into one of the mansion's private rooms. It was quieter here, but the silence did nothing to calm the storm in her chest. She sat on the edge of a velvet couch, clutching her belly with both hands, trying to breathe through the panic that clawed at her lungs. "Helena," Jack said gently, crouching in front of her. His hands, once trained to steady rifles and rescue comrades, now rested lightly on her knees. "You're safe. I've got you. Nothing will happen to you or the baby. Not while I'm here." But Helena shook her head, her tears spilling freely. "Safe? Jack, he shoved me. My own husband shoved me like I was nothing. What if I'd fallen? What if the baby?" Her words broke into a sob. Jack's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with fury. "He's not a husband. Not anymore. He's a coward." But the comfort did little to ease her despair. Helena wasn't just shaken, she was shattered. She buried her face in her hands, memories crashing into her. The nights she had defended Marcus to friends who whispered about his affairs. The mornings she had forced a smile, even when she knew he was lying. The countless times she had told herself things would get better, that if she just stayed quiet, if she just endured, love would return. But it hadn't. And now the whole world had seen the truth. "I've lost everything," she whispered. Jack frowned. "No, you still have yourself. You still have me. You have your child?" But Helena couldn't see it. All she could see was the ruins of a dream she had built with trembling hands. "The world saw him push me, Jack. Do you know what they'll say? That I'm weak, that I let this happen, that I'm the wife who couldn't hold on to her husband." Her voice cracked, rising into hysteria. "I'm a failure as a wife, a failure as a mother before I've even begun." Jack's hands gripped hers firmly. "Don't you dare say that. You are not a failure. He failed you. He humiliated you. He betrayed you. That's on him, not you." But Helena was spiraling. The shame, the fear, the humiliation, it was all too much. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, her chest tight as though the walls were closing in. She could hear the faint thrum of music from the terrace, the echo of laughter that no longer sounded human but monstrous, mocking. She rose unsteadily to her feet, pacing the room like a caged animal. "How am I supposed to raise this baby? How am I supposed to survive without him? I gave up everything for Marcus, Jack. My job, my independence, my voice. And now what do I have? Nothing. Just nothing." Her sobs filled the room, raw and broken. Jack stood, wrapping his arms around her as she shook in his embrace. "You still have fight in you," he murmured. "I see it. You may feel broken, but I know my sister. You don't stay down forever." But Helena couldn't believe him. Not yet. Hours passed. The party ended in whispers and scandal, with Marcus and Vanessa slipping away to avoid the flashing cameras. But the damage was already done. By morning, The video would be viral. By morning, Marcus's empire would tremble. Yet Alina didn't care about revenge or empires. Not now. When the last guest had gone, Alina sat by the nursery upstairs, staring at the half-finished crib Marcus had ordered, but never once touched. The room smelled faintly of paint and new wood, but to her it smelled like broken promises. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering softly to her unborn child. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I should have left him sooner. I should have protected you from this." The baby shifted gently inside her, as though answering. It only made her cry harder. Jack entered quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "You didn't deserve any of this," he said softly. "But maybe it happened for a reason. Maybe tonight was the night you stop hiding, Lena." Alina looked up at him, her eyes swollen, her voice hoarse. "I don't know how to be strong anymore." Jack walked over, kneeling beside her again. His eyes were steady, his voice certain. "You don't have to know how. You just have to decide you will. And when you do, I'll be right here to back you up." But Alina only shook her head, her doubt consuming her. She had been silenced for so long, diminished until she no longer recognized herself. How could she suddenly rise from the ashes when she barely had the strength to stand? The night dragged on, heavy with despair. For the first time since she married Marcus, Alina admitted to herself that love was gone, that her marriage was ashes. But knowing that truth didn't heal her. It hollowed her out. When dawn's light finally spilled across the horizon, Alina was still awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her heart heavy with fear. She felt like a ghost in her own home, trapped in a life she no longer wanted but didn't know how to escape. She whispered again, to herself, to her baby, to the silence around her. "Maybe Jack is wrong. Maybe I really am broken." Her tears slipped into her hair as she closed her eyes. But downstairs Jack was making phone calls, his voice low and clipped, his tone the same one he had used on military operations. He wasn't waiting for Alina to believe in herself again. He was preparing something that would change everything. And Alina had no idea what was coming next. Morning light poured through the wide glass windows of the Carter mansion, but to Alina it felt cold and merciless. She sat at the edge of her bed, her hands folded protectively over her stomach, her eyes hollow from a night without sleep. The humiliation of the poolside incident replayed endlessly in her mind. The shove, the gasps, the flashes of cameras, the way Marcus's face had twisted with rage as though she were the enemy instead of his wife. She thought she was finished, broken, too weak to fight. But Jack Lawson had other plans. Her brother entered the room quietly, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one on the nightstand and handed the other to her. His presence, calm but firm, was the only thing holding her together. "Drink," he said gently. "You'll need your strength." Alina took a sip, though her stomach churned. "Strength for what, Jack? To keep hiding, to face another day where everyone calls me pathetic?" Her voice cracked. "You saw it. I couldn't even defend myself. I'm nothing." Jack sat across from her, his eyes steady. "No, you're not nothing, and you're not done. You just don't know what cards you're holding yet." She frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Jack leaned forward, lowering his voice. "While I was deployed, I kept track of Marcus, not because I cared about him, but because I knew someday his greed would put you in danger. And I was right. The shove wasn't the first line he crossed, it's just the first one the world saw." Alina blinked. "What do you mean?" Jack pulled a slim folder from inside his jacket and placed it on the bed between them. Her heart skipped as she stared at it. "Marcus has been laundering money through shell companies. He's been bribing inspectors, cutting corners on construction, and siphoning investor funds into private accounts offshore. I have proof. Emails, bank transfers, recordings." Alina's breath caught. How do you even have this?" "I have contacts," Jack said simply. "People who owed me favors, men I served with, investigators who trust me more than they'll ever trust him. I've been watching him, Lena, waiting. And last night, he gave us the perfect trigger. Now the whole world is watching him, questioning him, which means we have the upper hand." Alina shook her head, stunned. "You're saying Marcus could lose everything?" Jack's expression hardened. "I'm saying Marcus will lose everything. If you want him exposed, I can make that happen." The words hit her like a tidal wave. For months she had been drowning in helplessness, believing Marcus held all the power. But now, Sitting in front of her was proof that his empire was built on lies, and that she had the ability to bring it crashing down. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Even if you have this, what good is it? He's powerful, Jack. He has lawyers, connections, people who protect him. Jack shook his head. Not anymore. Not after what he did last night. Investors will run the second they think their money isn't safe. Politicians will distance themselves. And the press, they'll eat this alive. Marcus doesn't realize it yet, but he's standing on quicksand. Elena's pulse quickened. For the first time in months, she felt a spark, small but undeniable, of hope. But with it came fear. If I do this, if I stand against him, he'll come after me. He'll try to destroy me. Jack's voice was steady, unyielding. Then let him try. You're not alone this time. You have me, and you have something he can't fight. Truth. Tears filled Elena's eyes, but they weren't tears of despair this time. They were tears of something new, something stronger. She whispered, almost to herself, I don't have to stay silent anymore. Jack nodded. No, you don't. But you need to make a choice. You can take this file and burn it, keep living in his shadow, waiting for the next time he decides to shove you down. Or, his eyes locked on hers, you can use it. You can rise. You can show the world who he really is. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the folder. Her fingers brushed the edge of the papers, her heart racing. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to hide, to keep pretending. But beneath the fear, another voice whispered, one she hadn't heard in years, the voice of the girl she used to be, the girl who believed in family, in love, in her own worth. She opened the folder. Pages of damning evidence stared back at her. Emails with Marcus's signature, wire transfers with his name, documents stamped with his company logo. It was undeniable. Her tears fell onto the pages, not from sorrow this time, but from the weight of possibility. Jack's hand rested on her shoulder. You're stronger than you think, Lena. I can fight him in the shadows, but the real blow, the one that finishes him, it has to come from you. The world needs to see the wife he tried to silence standing tall. Elena wiped her tears, her chest rising with a shaky breath. Then I'll do it. I'll fight. Jack's lips curved into a rare smile. That's my sister. For the first time, Elena straightened her shoulders. She wasn't just the humiliated wife anymore. She wasn't just the pregnant woman shoved at a party. She was Elena Carter, and she was about to take back everything Marcus had stolen from her. But Jack wasn't finished. There's one more thing you need to know. Elena looked at him, her heart pounding. What is it? Jack hesitated, then said, Marcus's investors aren't just businessmen. Some of them are dangerous. If they find out he's been cheating them, they won't just ruin him financially, they'll destroy him. And if you stand in his way, they'll come for you too. Elena's breath hitched. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Jack leaned closer, his voice grave. If you go down this road, there's no turning back. You'll be making enemies you can't even see. Elena swallowed hard, gripping the folder tighter. Fear coursed through her veins, but beneath it burned a fire she hadn't felt in years. I've already lost everything once, she said quietly. I'm not afraid to lose what's left. Not if it means protecting my child. Not if it means ending him. Jack studied her, then nodded slowly. Then it settled. Marcus Carter is going down. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders, but for the first time in so long, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. Elena Carter was no longer just a victim. She was a storm waiting to break, and the world had no idea what was coming. The morning after the poolside scandal, Marcus Carter woke to a nightmare he couldn't control. Headlines screamed across every platform. Millionaire shoves pregnant wife at poolside party. Marcus Carter's empire crumbles amid viral video. Vanessa Steele, mistress at the scene. Clips of the shove replayed endlessly on news channels, slowed down frame by frame. Commentators debated whether his career was over, while social media burned with outrage. Sponsors pulled out, investors demanded answers, and his phone rang without pause. For the first time in his carefully crafted life, Marcus wasn't admired. He was hated. But Marcus wasn't a man who surrendered easily. He stormed into his office, his voice booming as he barked orders. This will blow over. We'll spin it. We'll say she tripped. Vanessa, get the PR team. I'll sue anyone who tries to ruin me. Vanessa, pale and shaken, tried to hide her own fear. The cameras had caught her smirk that night. She wasn't just a mistress anymore. she was complicit. And unlike Marcus, she had no empire to shield her. What Marcus didn't know was that Alina was no longer cowering in silence. While he scrambled to protect his image, Alina was preparing for war. With Jack by her side, she met quietly with a team of investigators and attorneys. The folder Jack had given her became her weapon. The evidence of Marcus's corruption was undeniable: money laundering, fraud, bribery, enough to topple his empire and land him behind bars. But Alina didn't want revenge in the shadows. Not anymore. She wanted the world to see her, strong, unbroken, and unwilling to let Marcus dictate her life 1 second longer. So she transformed. Gone was the soft blue maternity dress, the timid smiles, the woman who stood in the background. In her place was Alina Carter, radiant and commanding. She wore a tailored white gown that draped elegantly over her belly. Her hair swept back to reveal the sharp lines of her face, her eyes no longer filled with tears, but fire. Jack stood at her side, a silent guardian, but it was clear. This was Alina's fight now. The press conference was held at a downtown hotel ballroom. Reporters flooded the room, cameras flashing as Alina stepped to the podium. The room hushed, the world waiting. She placed her hands firmly on the stand, her voice steady and clear. Last night, millions of you saw a man shove his pregnant wife. That man was my husband, Marcus Carter. For years I believed silence was love. I thought endurance was loyalty. I was wrong. Silence is surrender. Endurance is enabling. And love, real love, does not shove you down when you're already on your knees. Gasps filled the room. Flashes popped like lightning. Alina didn't falter. I stayed quiet because I thought I was protecting my family. But the truth is, silence only protected him. Today I end that silence. Today I stand not as his wife, not as his victim, but as a woman who refuses to be erased. Jack stepped forward, handing the file of evidence to a state investigator waiting in the front row. Alina lifted her chin, her voice slicing through the silence. My husband built his empire on lies, on stolen money, bribed officials, and broken promises. Here's the proof. I am turning it over to authorities today so justice can finally begin. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in on the damning documents, and within minutes, the story spread like wildfire. Marcus watched the live broadcast from his office, his face drained of color. His roar of rage shook the walls, but rage couldn't erase the truth. His empire was collapsing, and the woman he had tried to destroy was the one swinging the hammer. For Alina, it was more than revenge. It was rebirth. That night, as the city buzzed with the scandal, Alina sat with Jack on the hotel balcony. The weight on her chest was lighter than it had been in years. She touched her stomach, whispering softly to her baby, "You'll know strength, little one. You'll know dignity. And you'll never grow up thinking silence is love." Jack leaned on the railing, watching her with pride. "You did it, Lena. You didn't just survive, you won." She smiled through her tears, the first genuine smile in months. "I thought I was broken, but maybe I was just waiting to become who I was meant to be." Down below, protesters gathered outside Marcus's office building, holding signs, chanting his name with venom. Investors filed lawsuits, the government froze his accounts, and Vanessa vanished into obscurity. The empire he had sacrificed his soul to build was crumbling faster than he could patch the cracks. And Alina? She wasn't hiding anymore. She had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, her power. Days later, she walked into a charity gala, not on Marcus's arm, but on her own, with Jack at her side. The whispers were different this time. No longer pitying, no longer cruel. They were awed, respectful, inspired. She's the one who stood up to him. She's the reason he's finished. She's stronger than all of them. Alina didn't need to respond. She simply walked with her head high, her hand resting on her belly, the glow of resilience surrounding her. For the first time, she wasn't just a shadow in Marcus's world. She was the light of her own. And as the cameras flashed, capturing her transformation, Alina knew this truth. Marcus Carter had shoved her once, but she had risen higher than he could ever reach. Because women like her, women who endure, who suffer, who break and then rebuild, are unshakable. And no amount of money, power, or cruelty could ever silence her again. This was not her ending. It was her beginning. So that's how the story comes to an end, my dear friends. Are you still here with me right now? If you are, it must mean something in Alina's journey touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. And I want you to know, that's not just her story. it could be yours too. Elena's life teaches us something powerful. Even in the darkest, most humiliating moments, there is a spark inside of us that cannot be destroyed. She thought she was broken. She thought she had lost everything. And yet, in that very breaking, she found her strength. She rose. The Stoic philosopher spoke of this thousands of years ago. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How many times have we convinced ourselves we're too weak, too defeated, when in truth we were just one decision away from reclaiming our power? And Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's exactly what Elena discovered. Silence is not love, endurance is not loyalty, and true strength is not about never falling. It's about rising every time we do. And maybe, just maybe, if you're still listening right now, you needed that reminder for your own life. That no matter who tried to shove you down, no matter how many times you felt unseen or unloved, you are still here. You still have the power to rise. So if this story spoke to you, I invite you to do 3 simple things. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel so you can walk with us through more stories of resilience, healing, and transformation. Because remember, this isn't just Elena's story. It's a reminder for all of us. You are stronger than you think, and your beginning might be waiting right here, right now. Thunder rattled the stained glass windows of St. Agnes Chapel, the rain pounding down so hard it sounded like fists beating against the ancient roof. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies, white roses, and whispered grief. Black umbrellas stood like silent sentinels at the entrance, marking the line between the storm outside and the even fiercer storm brewing within. No one expected her to wake up, least of all her husband, Nathaniel. Least of all his elegant, dark-haired mistress who lingered close by, clutching a silk handkerchief as though she belonged here. Least of all the dozens of mourners who filled the pews, dressed in their finest black, faces somber but eyes sharp with curiosity. The city's elite had gathered for the funeral of Olivia Lancaster, age 28, 7 months pregnant, beloved wife of tech mogul Nathaniel Lancaster. Headlines over the past week had painted a tragic portrait. Young philanthropist dies suddenly. Billionaire's pregnant wife gone too soon. Photos of Olivia, her soft hazel eyes, her kind smile, her gentle hand resting on her swollen belly, had flooded social media, each post gathering thousands of broken heart emojis and well wishes. But all that grief, all those memories, felt like a cruel joke now. Because Olivia Lancaster was not dead. She blinked, slowly, painfully, her world swaying into focus. Her head throbbed. Her limbs felt impossibly heavy, weighed down by something more than just exhaustion. She tasted bitterness on her tongue, smelled the sharp tang of chemicals beneath the sickly sweetness of flowers. For a terrifying moment, she didn't understand where she was. The polished mahogany of her own casket, the luxurious satin pressed against her cheek, the strange muffled cries and footsteps and organ music, the sensation of something cold and final, something meant to be her end. Olivia's mind spun backward in a rush. The sharp pain in her side, the sudden dizziness, Nathaniel's urgent phone call for help that never came, the last glimpse of his face, calm, almost relieved, before the darkness swallowed her. She tried to move her arms, to cry out, but her body rebelled, each muscle weak and unresponsive. Yet the voices outside her coffin pierced the fog of confusion. "She's gone," a man whispered, voice trembling. "She's really gone, Nathaniel. You're free." Another voice, her husband's voice, answered, low and smooth. "It had to happen, Mia. She was always too fragile. She couldn't handle the pressure of my world. You know that." A sharp, muffled laugh, a woman's laugh, laced with venom and triumph. "Well, darling, you're free now. No wife, no baby to complicate things. Just us." The words crashed into Olivia like icy water. No wife, no baby, just us. Terror raced through her veins. She tried again to move, focusing all her strength, her desperation, on her right hand. Her fingers twitched. She felt the velvet lining. The coffin was only half closed for the viewing, a thin line of light sneaking through the seam. She forced her eyes to adjust, her mind fighting for clarity. Outside, the priest's eulogy faded into the background as Nathaniel and his mistress stepped closer to the casket. Olivia heard the soft tap of stiletto heels on marble, the rustle of silk as the woman leaned in. Pity we had to do it this way, Mia murmured, voice syrupy. But now you can inherit it all, love, her money, her shares. The world's yours. Nathaniel's sigh was theatrical. I never wanted this. I just wanted out. Olivia was a burden, too sweet for this world, too trusting, too naive to see what was right in front of her. The fury that boiled inside Olivia nearly drowned out her fear. Betrayal cut deeper than the drugs in her system. Memories flooded back, Nathaniel's distant gaze, his late nights, the sudden appearance of Mia at every company event, the subtle, snide comments about Olivia's delicate state. She was never meant to survive this. This was their plan. Her husband and his lover plotting her end while she lay helpless, carrying his child. Outside, the crowd began to move. It was nearly time to lower the casket. The undertaker signaled to close the lid. Olivia's panic spiked. She summoned every ounce of willpower, focused on the life growing inside her. For her baby, she could not let this be the end. With a final, desperate surge, Olivia's fist shot upward, slamming into the coffin lid. A sudden thud reverberated through the chapel, freezing everyone in place. Gasps exploded through the crowd. The priest staggered back, dropping his prayer book. Mia shrieked, her face turning white. Nathaniel's hands flew to his mouth, eyes wide with terror. Olivia Lancaster, presumed dead, sat up in her casket, eyes blazing, breath coming in ragged gulps. Her hair tangled, face pale but defiant, one hand instinctively covering her belly. The silence was absolute. For a single electric second, no one moved. Then, as if on cue, chaos erupted. Mourners screamed, phones appeared, cameras flashing, the world capturing every second of this impossible miracle. Mia fainted. Nathaniel backed away, stumbling, muttering, "No, it's not possible. It can't be." But Olivia was done being quiet, done being the trusting, fragile wife. She fixed Nathaniel with a stare that could slice steel. "I'm not dead, Nathaniel," she said, her voice shaking but strong, "and neither is your secret." As her words echoed through the chapel, the story of Olivia Lancaster's death and resurrection was only just beginning. Outside, the chapel was chaos. Mourners stumbled over pews, scrambling to get away from the woman they thought was dead. The soft sobs of grief had turned to screams of fear and confusion. Phones flashed, someone dialed 911, and at least 3 people fainted dead away. Through it all, Olivia remained upright, trembling in her casket, fighting the urge to collapse. She felt weak, like she'd just climbed out of the grave itself, but something fierce burned in her chest. For a long, dizzy moment, she just sat there. The cold air in the church pressed against her skin. Her vision swam with light and shadows, her head still foggy with the remnants of whatever drug Nathaniel and Mia had used. Every instinct told her to lie down, to sleep, to disappear again. But she forced herself to stay awake, to remember. She was alive, and she had to prove it, to herself, to everyone. The paramedics burst into the chapel, pushing through the crowd. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one asked, voice trembling between fear and awe. Olivia blinked up at him, recognizing the uniform. She tried to answer, but her throat felt scraped raw, words coming out as little more than a rasp. "I need help. Please, my baby." They hurried to lift her gently from the casket, laying her on a stretcher. For a moment, Olivia clutched her belly, panic searing her mind. But the baby kicked, a reassuring flutter. Relief nearly overwhelmed her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the life inside her, the child that Nathaniel had wanted gone. As the medics rushed her toward the ambulance, Olivia glanced back into the church. Nathaniel and Mia stood frozen at the altar, their masks finally slipping. Nathaniel's perfect posture wilted into shock. Mia's lips parted in horror, her hand still clutching Nathaniel's arm. Neither of them came to her side. On the way to the hospital, Olivia's mind reeled back through her life. She wasn't always this fragile. She wasn't always a victim. Olivia Lancaster had grown up in the shadow of privilege. Her parents, both university professors, taught her that compassion was more important than ambition. She learned the value of kindness, of helping others. Her life was quiet, structured. Summers spent volunteering at animal shelters, winters collecting food for those less fortunate. She never wanted the spotlight. She never wanted drama. After her mother died, Olivia's world became even smaller. She lived with her father in a modest house on the edge of the city, taking care of him after his stroke. She put her dreams on hold, shelving art school applications and her love of painting. For years she was just the dutiful daughter, invisible to the world. Everything changed when she met Nathaniel. He was dazzling, 10 years older, a rising star in the tech world, already making headlines with his startup. He saw her at a fundraiser, drawn by her gentle smile and the way she listened more than she spoke. Nathaniel swept her into his orbit, promising her the kind of fairy tale she'd only read about. At first, Olivia felt lucky. Nathaniel was attentive, generous, always bringing her flowers or booking surprise trips. He introduced her to high society, taught her which fork to use, how to smile at the right people, how to laugh at jokes she didn't understand. He made her believe she could be something more. But over time, the fairy tale cracked. Nathaniel's love was conditional, measured in performances. He wanted Olivia to be the perfect wife, elegant, supportive, and above all, silent. When she voiced her own opinions, he called her naive. When she asked about his business, he changed the subject. Whenever she tried to connect, he retreated behind a wall of charm and cold calculation. By the time Olivia was pregnant, the cracks had become chasms. Nathaniel began staying out late, making excuses about business meetings that never appeared on his calendar. He criticized her weight, her mood swings, her so-called lack of ambition. He hired Mia as his executive assistant and insisted Olivia welcome her like a friend. Olivia, desperate to hold on to the dream, convinced herself things would get better. She busied herself with charity work, painting murals at children's hospitals, teaching art classes to kids in shelters. But no matter how much she gave, it was never enough for Nathaniel. She had no one to turn to. Her father passed away just after she found out she was pregnant. Her friends drifted away, intimidated by Nathaniel's status or driven off by Mia's subtle sabotage. Olivia was left alone in a glass mansion, her every move scrutinized, her every decision questioned. The media loved the story. Billionaire's wife, a modern Cinderella, but behind closed doors, she was a ghost. A fragile, anxious woman who had sacrificed everything, her art, her dreams, her freedom, for a man who didn't love her. Lying in the hospital bed, Olivia stared up at the harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses bustled in and out, checking her vitals, monitoring the baby's heartbeat. The hospital felt both cold and safe. For the first time in months, she didn't have to pretend. A detective arrived, notebook in hand, asking questions. "Do you remember what happened to you, Mrs. Lancaster? Did anyone give you something to drink or eat before you lost consciousness?" Olivia hesitated, mind flickering over Nathaniel's face. His cold smile, Mia's red lips, the bitter aftertaste in her mouth the night she collapsed. She wanted to scream the truth, but she knew no one would believe her. At least, not yet. I'm not sure," she whispered. "It's all a blur." He nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll run some tests. If you remember anything, call me." When he left, Olivia's mind raced. She couldn't trust anyone, not even herself. But she had survived. Somehow, against every odd, she had clawed her way back from the brink. She was weak, but not broken. And as she placed a trembling hand on her belly, she vowed that her child would never suffer the way she had. Back at the chapel, Nathaniel and Mia faced a media storm they never imagined. Reporters swarmed the church, demanding answers. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was it a miracle or something more sinister? And as Olivia lay alone in the hospital, the world watched and waited for her next move. The world outside the hospital became a circus overnight. News vans crowded the streets, satellite dishes pointed at the sky, hungry for a headline. Talk shows ran with wild theories. Olivia Lancaster, the miracle widow, the wife who rose from the dead. Social media exploded with hashtags, Lancaster resurrection, funeral awakening, and inevitably, what did the husband do? But as the world buzzed, inside her hospital room, Olivia was silent. She watched the rain slide down the window, trying to steady her breathing. Nurses came and went with forced smiles, pretending not to recognize her from TV. Her phone vibrated constantly, calls from numbers she didn't know, messages from friends who hadn't spoken to her in years. She ignored them all. What haunted her most was not the outside chaos, but the echo of Nathaniel's words. She was a burden, too trusting, too naive to see what was right in front of her. His voice replayed every time she closed her eyes, mingled with Mia's taunting laugh. By the next morning, the doctors pronounced both Olivia and the baby healthy, though the toxicology report showed a cocktail of sedatives in her blood. Enough to keep her still, but not enough to end her. Nathaniel was careful, as always. The hospital offered police protection, but Olivia knew how powerful her husband's lawyers were. They spun everything. There was never any evidence, never a direct line back to him. Discharged from the hospital, she faced the inevitable, returning to the Lancaster mansion. It sat perched on a bluff above the city, a modern castle of glass, steel, and secrets. The driveway wound through iron gates, past manicured gardens and marble fountains. To the world, it was a symbol of success, a monument to Nathaniel's genius. To Olivia, it was a cage. She hesitated at the front doors, keys trembling in her hand. A butler greeted her with polite shock, then ushered her inside. The entrance gleamed with white marble floors, gold accents, and a 30-foot chandelier that looked like falling stars. Portraits of Nathaniel hung everywhere, smiling at galas, shaking hands with politicians, his arm around Olivia at their wedding. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life. She wandered through the silent rooms. The grand library with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the formal dining hall that hosted senators and CEOs, the private art gallery Nathaniel had built to impress her. Everything was curated, expensive, cold. No sign of real love, just the trappings of success. In the living room, a portrait stared back at her, Olivia in her wedding dress, smiling. She barely recognized herself. The innocence, the hope, the trust. It all seemed like another lifetime. She climbed the stairs to her bedroom, heart pounding. She expected to find everything untouched, preserved like a mausoleum. Instead, a chill ran through her. Her closet had been half emptied. Most of her clothes were gone. Only a handful of maternity dresses remained, all in muted colors. The jewelry box was missing, her wedding ring left on the dresser like an accusation. Down the hall, voices drifted from Nathaniel's private office. She recognized the low rumble of his voice, the sharp edge of Mia's laughter. They didn't even try to be discreet. Not anymore. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. "She can't prove anything," Mia said. "She was drugged. They'll call her unstable. She'll look desperate." Nathaniel's reply was icy. "We'll spin it. I'll say she suffered a breakdown. If she goes to the police, my team will bury it. By next week, no one will care." Olivia's blood ran cold. She felt the walls closing in, the same suffocating panic she'd known for months. But this time, something had changed. She wasn't the naive girl Nathaniel married. She was a mother now, her child's only protector. The past replayed in her mind. The countless parties where Nathaniel paraded her around like a trophy, the women who circled him, always too close, the coldness that crept into his eyes whenever she mentioned the baby, the cruel jokes he made with his friends about breeding for headlines. The day Mia arrived, first as an assistant, then as Nathaniel's shadow, then as something much more. The truth was, Olivia had been alone long before the funeral. She'd lived in a palace, but she was invisible. Suddenly, the front door slammed. Olivia flinched, heart racing. She peeked through the banister. Nathaniel and Mia stepped into the foyer, arm in arm, laughing as if nothing had happened. They stopped when they saw her at the top of the stairs. Nathaniel recovered first, sliding his mask back on. "Olivia, we're so glad you're home," he said, voice full of forced concern. "How are you feeling?" Mia smirked behind him, eyes glittering with malice. "We were just planning your welcome back dinner," she said sweetly. Olivia forced herself to look them both in the eye. "Don't bother. I'm not hungry." An awkward silence filled the grand hallway. The tension was thick as syrup. Nathaniel stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You look tired, Liv. Maybe you should rest. We'll talk later, when you're feeling stable." Mia snickered, turning away. "Maybe a long nap would help. You seem to like those." Olivia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She turned, climbed back to her room, and shut the door behind her. She pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the baby move. She'd survived the impossible. She'd come back from the dead. But in this palace of secrets, her battle was only beginning. In the silence, she made a promise to her child and herself. She would never be powerless again. Whatever it took, she'd find a way out and take her revenge. The Lancaster mansion was beautiful on the outside, a palace of glass and gold set atop the city's wealthiest hill. But inside, it was a battlefield. Olivia barely slept her first night back. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the scrape of Nathaniel's voice, or Mia's cold laughter echoing down the marble halls. In the darkness, she replayed the words she overheard. Unstable, desperate, breakdown. It was clear. Her husband and his mistress weren't just cruel, they were dangerous. Morning light barely crept through the blackout curtains. Olivia sat up in bed, her body still weak, every muscle aching as if she'd climbed out of her own grave. Her baby kicked, a small reassurance that she wasn't alone. She rose and walked to the window, staring at the city sprawling beneath the estate. Somewhere down there, normal people lived honest lives. Up here, everything was a performance. Downstairs, the clatter of silverware and the low hum of voices signaled the beginning of another Lancaster day. The staff were tense. She saw it in the way they averted their eyes, the tightness in their smiles. Even the housekeeper, Mrs. Branson, a sturdy woman with a kind heart, seemed different, always glancing nervously at the security cameras. Olivia forced herself to dress. Simple black pants, a loose sweater, nothing fancy. She didn't want to look weak, but she didn't want to play princess either. She walked slowly down the grand staircase, steadying herself with every step. The dining room was all glass walls and fresh flowers, the table set for 3. Nathaniel stood at the head, reading emails on his tablet. He looked up, putting on his practiced, sympathetic expression. "Morning, Liv," he said. "You look better." Mia was already seated, sipping fresh squeezed orange juice, dressed in a white silk blouse and diamonds. She didn't bother to hide her smirk. "Sleep well?" Mia asked, her tone dripping with mock concern. Olivia took a seat across from them, refusing to break eye contact. "I'm here, aren't I?" Nathaniel tried to sound reassuring. "We're all a bit shaken. What happened was traumatic for everyone. You need time. If you want, we can call your doctor, or a therapist." Olivia knew what he was doing, laying groundwork for the breakdown story. Make her look unstable. Gaslight her until she started to doubt her own sanity. She forced a polite smile. "Thank you, but I think I just need space. Less interference." Mia leaned forward, tapping her perfectly manicured nails on the table. "Of course, but you know, Olivia, you gave us all quite a scare. We thought you were gone." Nathaniel barely slept for days. The lie was bold. Olivia could see it in Mia's eyes, the gleam of someone who thinks she's already won. Nathaniel's phone buzzed. He picked it up, scrolling through messages. "We'll need to make a statement to the press. Something about your miraculous recovery. Keep it vague. The world wants to see you. Maybe just a photo, looking, well." Mia snickered. "Maybe put on a little makeup? People are saying you look like a ghost." Olivia fought back a surge of rage. "Funny, I was thinking about ghosts too," she replied, her gaze never leaving Mia's. "Some spirits just can't rest, you know?" For a moment, the room was tense. Nathaniel shot Mia a warning look. Olivia rose from the table. "I'll be in my studio, alone please." She made her way to the far end of the mansion, to the art room Nathaniel had built to show off for guests, but which she'd turned into her own sanctuary. Sunlight streamed in through skylights, illuminating half-finished canvases. Here, for a little while, she could breathe. She set up a blank canvas, her hands trembling, and let the brush do the work. Each stroke calmed her, helped her remember who she was before all this madness. But peace never lasted. After lunch, as she passed the library, she overheard Mia on the phone. "Yes, everything's under control," Mia purred. "Olivia's back, but she's barely functioning. Trust me, she's not a threat. Nathaniel and I have everything. The house, the company shares, she won't fight." Olivia's heart pounded. So that was their plan. Take everything. Leave her with nothing. Maybe worse. She walked to the garden for air. The roses were in full bloom, but she barely noticed. She heard footsteps behind her. Nathaniel appeared, his mask gone for a moment. "Olivia," he said softly, "why are you making this harder than it needs to be? You've always been fragile. People expect you to fall apart. Don't disappoint them now." She stared at him, searching for any hint of the man she married. There was none. He stepped closer. "You don't have to fight us. Just fade away. I'll make sure you're taken care of. It's better for everyone." A chill ran through her. This was his threat, hidden behind a smile. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned and walked away, hands pressed protectively to her belly. She was terrified, but something inside her hardened. They thought she was weak. They thought she would break. But Olivia Lancaster was done playing their game. She went back to her room, locked the door, and pulled out her old journal. She began writing everything, what she'd heard, what she'd seen, every cruel word, every threat. She needed evidence. She needed allies. She wasn't sure who to trust yet, but she knew one thing. She would not let her enemies win. As the sun set behind the glass palace, Olivia looked in the mirror. For the first time, she saw not a victim but a survivor. The enemies in her house had no idea what was coming for them. A week passed, but the air inside the Lancaster mansion only grew heavier. Olivia felt like she was living under a microscope. Every move was watched, by Nathaniel, by Mia, by the household staff who reported back to them. She barely slept. She barely ate. Her energy was fading, but her resolve grew harder every time Nathaniel smiled that cold smile, or Mia brushed by her with a taunting, accidental bump. Olivia's only sanctuary was her art studio. One morning, as she painted, her phone buzzed. A message from Nathaniel's assistant. Black tie required. Family appearance at the foundation gala tonight. Press will be present. No request, just a command. Olivia stared at the text, stomach twisting. She hadn't been to a public event since her funeral. She knew what this was. Nathaniel's chance to parade his perfect family, spin the narrative, and bury her truth beneath glitter and charity. That evening, a limo pulled up outside the house. Olivia wore a dark blue gown that skimmed her swollen belly. Her hair swept back to reveal a pale, determined face. Nathaniel greeted her at the door with Mia on his arm. "Ready?" he asked, all charm for the cameras. "Let's not keep anyone waiting." The ride was silent, tension crackling between the three of them. As they pulled up to the grand ballroom, cameras flashed, capturing every second. Olivia stepped out first, greeted by a wall of reporters. "Olivia, how does it feel to be back? Is it true you woke up at your own funeral? How is the baby?" Questions flew at her like arrows, but she held her head high, keeping her answers short, her eyes fixed on the golden lights ahead. Inside, the ballroom was a world apart. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. Guests in tuxedos and glittering gowns sipped champagne, whispering as Olivia passed. She felt their eyes, pity, curiosity, and a few sharp with jealousy. She caught her reflection in a wall of mirrored glass. Poised, mysterious, and so alone. Nathaniel immediately slipped away to greet donors, leaving Olivia exposed. Mia circled her like a shark, smiling for the press. "Smile, darling," Mia whispered through gritted teeth, "or you'll ruin Nathaniel's big night." Olivia forced a smile, her body tense. As they mingled, she noticed Nathaniel at the center of a laughing circle of investors, his hand on Mia's back, introducing her as a key member of the family. He barely acknowledged Olivia, as if she were just a distant relative. Halfway through the evening, the charity auction began. Nathaniel took the stage, handsome and charming, thanking the crowd for their generosity. "I'm especially grateful for the support of my beautiful wife Olivia, whose strength has inspired us all," he declared, the lie ringing through the room. Cameras zoomed in, applause rose, but as Nathaniel spoke, Mia sidled up beside Olivia. "You're making this hard on everyone, you know," she whispered, voice low and venomous. "If you really loved Nathaniel, you'd disappear quietly. The baby too. He deserves better than this mess." Before Olivia could reply, the MC announced, "And now, our special guests, Nathaniel Lancaster and his lovely family, please join us on stage for a photo." The crowd turned. Olivia's heart hammered. She moved woodenly, climbing onto the stage beside Nathaniel. The flashbulbs went off in a blinding storm. As the crowd clapped, Olivia felt Mia's hand brush against hers. Mia leaned in, her lips barely moving. "After tonight, you'll wish you'd stayed dead." Then, in front of everyone, Nathaniel reached for Mia's hand, publicly, boldly, as if she belonged there. The room fell into a shocked hush, only for a second. But it was enough. Olivia's humiliation was complete, broadcast for all to see. The media ate it up. Lancaster love triangle? Pregnant wife, billionaire husband, and the other woman. Headlines blared the next morning. Social media was a storm. Olivia became the punchline of memes and late-night jokes. She tried not to look, but she saw it all. The hashtags, the gifs, the freeze frame of her stunned face as Nathaniel held Mia's hand. The calls started soon after. Reporters, gossip bloggers, distant relatives she hadn't spoken to in years, even so-called friends, some sympathetic, most just hungry for gossip. The humiliation was relentless. Nathaniel didn't come home that night. The next morning, Olivia found a note on the kitchen table. "For your own good, stay out of the spotlight. The board is nervous." It wasn't signed, but she knew his handwriting, and she saw Mia's lipstick mark at the bottom. That day, Olivia finally broke. She locked herself in her studio, collapsed to the floor, and let herself cry for hours. Big, silent, shaking sobs that left her empty and cold. She felt the old Olivia die, piece by piece. The trusting wife, the hopeful mother, the woman who believed in fairy tales. But as the sun set and the world moved on without her, something new stirred deep inside Olivia, a spark that refused to be extinguished. She pressed a hand to her belly, wiped her tears, and stared at the blank canvas before her. If this was her lowest point, then she would climb out. They thought they'd destroyed her. But Olivia Lancaster was still here, and she was about to become something no one, not Nathaniel, not Mia, not the entire watching world, could ever predict. The aftermath of the gala felt like a slow-motion disaster. Olivia spent the next several days in her room, the curtains drawn, her phone silenced. The mansion became a ghost house. She barely noticed the muted sounds of Mia's laughter echoing off marble, or Nathaniel's voice barking orders into his phone in the study. She didn't eat. She barely slept. Haunted by the flashes of humiliation she'd suffered on stage, the image of Nathaniel's hand entwined with Mia's, the cameras, the whispers, the world turning her pain into entertainment. In those dark hours, Olivia's mind wandered to dangerous places. She remembered how easy it would be to disappear, to fade out of this life and let the world forget her. No one would miss her. Nathaniel had made sure of that. The baby was the only thing that anchored her. Sometimes when she pressed her hands to her belly, she felt a flutter, a kick, a tiny reminder that she was not alone. Not really. Still, she cried until she was empty, her sobs echoing through the cold walls, ignored by everyone. One night, the housekeeper, Mrs. Branson, knocked gently at her door, a bowl of soup in hand. "You have to eat, dear," she pleaded, her eyes brimming with concern. "You need your strength. For the baby." Olivia managed a shaky smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Branson. I'll try." But the soup sat untouched on her nightstand as Olivia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She tried to remember who she'd been before all this. She used to dream. She used to paint, to volunteer, to laugh. Now her only companion was pain. The press didn't let up. Every morning brought a new headline. Olivia Lancaster, the ghost wife. Pregnant, alone, and betrayed. Talk show hosts debated whether she was crazy or courageous. Olivia didn't care anymore. Let them say what they wanted. She had nothing left to lose. The anxiety became physical. She shook at random times, panic attacks rolling through her like waves. She vomited often, unsure if it was the stress or the pregnancy. She was afraid to go outside, afraid someone would recognize her. She didn't want pity. She didn't want anything but silence. Nathaniel never visited her, not once. He texted a few times. "The board wants you to stay quiet. Let's not make this worse. Think of the company." Each message felt colder than the last. Mia sent no messages, only looks. Smug, victorious, triumphant whenever Olivia stumbled into the hallway. One evening, Olivia forced herself to walk to the nursery they'd once decorated together. The wallpaper was covered with pale blue clouds, a mobile of tiny silver stars hanging over the empty crib. She traced her fingers over the edge, imagining what her baby's laugh would sound like. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time there was something different in them. Anger. Not just at Nathaniel, or Mia, or even herself. Anger at a world that would rather watch her fall than help her rise. She found herself talking to her unborn child in the darkness. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I'm so weak. I'm sorry I let them do this to us." But the baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if to tell her she wasn't alone, as if to say, "Fight." That night, Olivia finally slept. When she woke, her pillow was wet with tears, but the heaviness in her chest had shifted. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but under it was something else, resolve. The next morning, she showered, dressed, and opened the curtains. Sunlight spilled into the room, blinding at first but warm. She ate a small breakfast, the first real food in days. Mrs. Branson smiled in relief. "That's better, darling," she said, squeezing Olivia's hand. Olivia thanked her, her voice still rough from disuse. She walked through the house, feeling every bruise on her soul. She didn't hide when she passed Mia in the hall. She didn't flinch when Nathaniel brushed past her, pretending not to see her. Instead, she went back to her art studio. She stared at the blank canvas, heart pounding. Her hands shook as she lifted a brush, but she forced herself to start. Color spilled across the white expanse. Dark, furious, but alive. Each stroke was a scream, a prayer, a declaration. She painted her pain, her anger, her hope for her child. She painted the woman she wanted to become. For hours, she lost herself in the work, the world outside fading. When she finished, she stepped back and saw herself, a woman rising from ashes, battered but unbroken, carrying a child toward the light. As dusk fell, Olivia looked out over the city, her heart beating stronger. She wasn't healed. She wasn't safe. But she was done being afraid. She opened her journal and started writing. A plan, a promise, a way forward. They thought she would crumble. They thought they had won. But Olivia Lancaster was still here, and she was no longer their victim. The days blurred together as Olivia forced herself back to life. She stuck to routines, eating small meals, taking short walks, painting through her nightmares. But something inside her had hardened. She'd hit rock bottom, but now she was clawing her way back up, each breath a little less shallow, each step a little steadier. One gray afternoon, a letter arrived at the mansion. It wasn't delivered through the usual household mail. This one came by hand, slipped under her studio door. Olivia found it just as she finished a painting, a wild, furious swirl of color that looked nothing like her old work. The envelope was plain, no return address, her name written in bold, unfamiliar print. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, she found a single flash drive and a note. Trust no one in this house. You're not alone. Play this when you're certain you're not being watched. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. She checked the hall, locked the studio door, then powered up her laptop, one Nathaniel never touched. The files on the drive were simple audio recordings, but the first one made her blood run cold. She won't survive this, not after the drugs. If she does, we'll say she's delusional. She's always been unstable. No one will believe her. That was Nathaniel's voice. There was no mistaking it. A second voice, Mia's, followed. You're sure about the will? Her shares go to you if anything happens? Already taken care of, Nathaniel replied. Once the baby is gone, there's nothing left to tie me to her. She's just a sad story. Olivia listened, jaw clenched. There it was, the proof she'd needed, not just of betrayal, but of attempted murder. Not only had Nathaniel and Mia conspired to destroy her, but they'd done it for money, for power, for freedom from responsibility. She shook with rage and relief. But who had sent the recording? Who else knew the truth? A second file played, quieter this time. A man's voice, gentle but firm. Olivia, if you're hearing this, it means you survived. You don't know me, but I knew your father. He helped me once, a long time ago. I work for people who don't like what Nathaniel's doing, not just to you, but to the company, the charities, everyone. If you want to fight, don't do it alone. Meet me at the old Elmhurst Gallery tomorrow at noon. Tell no one. Olivia's head spun. Was this real or another trap? She took a deep breath, listening again to the recording. The details were too specific, the concern in the voice too genuine to be one of Nathaniel's games. For the first time in months, hope flickered in her chest. That night, Olivia barely slept. She hid the flash drive, locked her laptop, and lay awake planning. If she could trust this stranger, she might finally have a chance to take her life back. She could expose Nathaniel and Mia, not just to the public, but to the law. Morning came heavy with rain. Olivia dressed plainly, pulling her hair into a bun, and left the mansion through the garden gate. She felt exposed on the street, every step watched by unseen eyes. But she pressed on, the city's noise oddly comforting after weeks of silence. Elmhurst Gallery was abandoned now, dust and memories clinging to the windows. Inside, she found a man waiting near the back, mid-50s, gray-haired, wearing a plain suit and a warm, tired smile. You must be Olivia, he said softly. My name is Richard. She studied him. There was nothing threatening about him, nothing like Nathaniel or his cold-eyed business partners. Why are you helping me? Richard explained quickly. Years ago, Olivia's father had saved Richard's family from financial ruin. He'd never forgotten it, and after her father died, he'd kept watch from a distance. Nathaniel made a lot of enemies on his way up. I have friends in law enforcement, in the press. We can help you, but you have to be smart. You have to fight. He handed her a folder, evidence, forged medical records, emails between Nathaniel and a shadowy lawyer, photos of Mia and Nathaniel together weeks before her accident, enough to start a real investigation. Olivia's head spun. Why now? She whispered. Why me? Because you're not weak, Richard said, his gaze steady. You survived. You're a mother. And you have the truth now. All you need is the courage to use it. Tears burned Olivia's eyes, but she refused to cry. For the first time, she saw herself not as a victim, but as a woman with a weapon, proof of the evil done to her. She left the gallery clutching the evidence, heart pounding. Every sound seemed amplified. She knew she had to be careful. If Nathaniel and Mia realized what she had, they would stop at nothing. But Olivia wasn't going back to being afraid. That night, Olivia drafted an email to a trusted journalist, an old friend from her charity work, someone who hated corruption as much as she did. She didn't hit send yet, but she was ready. The game had changed. She had allies, she had proof, and she had something even more powerful. Nothing left to lose. For the first time in a long time, Olivia stood at the window, looking out over the city. The rain had stopped. Lights glittered across the skyline, and in her reflection she saw not just herself, but the fierce, determined mother she'd become. This was her twist. The victim was gone. In her place was someone ready to fight back. Sunrise painted the city gold the next morning. For the first time in months, Olivia woke before her alarm, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with something fierce and bright. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, running her fingers over her tangled hair, her pale, tired face. The woman staring back at her looked like a ghost, but behind her eyes burned a new kind of fire. She turned on the shower and let the hot water wash the pain from her skin. Every scar, every bruise, every sleepless night melted down the drain. Olivia dried off, stood naked before the mirror, and made a silent promise. I am not invisible. I am not weak. I am a mother, and I am not done. For hours, she worked. She brushed and styled her hair, applied makeup, not to hide, but to reclaim her face. She chose a dress Nathaniel hated. Crimson, bold, hugging her curves and accentuating her baby bump, defiant and unashamed. She finished the look with her mother's sapphire earrings, a symbol of her family's quiet strength. Downstairs, Mrs. Branson nearly dropped her tray. You look radiant, Miss Olivia. Olivia smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Branson. Can you help me with something? The housekeeper nodded, eyes shining. I need you to drive me into the city. I have business to handle, and I want you with me. They left the mansion together, Olivia feeling every eye on her. For the first time, she didn't care if Mia saw her. She didn't care what Nathaniel thought. In the car, she explained everything to Mrs. Branson, the recordings, the evidence, the meeting at Elmhurst. The older woman squeezed her hand. You're braver than you know, child. Whatever you need, I'm with you. Olivia's first stop was her lawyer's office. She strode in, shoulders back, eyes clear. She handed over the evidence, every file and photo meticulously copied onto a new flash drive. Her lawyer, Miss Fields, listened with growing outrage. We have enough to destroy them, Miss Fields said, voice hard. But you need to be ready. Once we move, there's no going back. They'll try to discredit you, smear you. I'm not scared, Olivia said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. I want to go public. I want the world to see what they did to me, to our baby. I want Nathaniel and Mia to know they can't win. They planned for hours, going over every detail. Olivia insisted her story come out on her own terms. No more whispers, no more rumors. She wrote her statement with trembling hands, but as she typed, her voice grew stronger. I was betrayed by the man I loved and nearly killed for his ambition, but I survived. My child survived, and I refused to hide anymore. From the law office, Olivia went straight to her favorite boutique. The owner, an old friend, embraced her, tears in her eyes. You are always the kindest soul, Olivia. Let's remind them who you are. They picked a wardrobe, striking dresses, smart blazers, soft clothes for comfort, but also power. Olivia let herself enjoy the process, each new outfit a layer of armor. The transformation wasn't just on the outside. Olivia called her old friends, those she'd lost touch with during her marriage. People who loved her before Nathaniel changed everything. She told them the truth. Some wept, some offered support. All promised to stand with her if things got ugly. She returned to the mansion just before sunset, face glowing, spirits soaring. Mia nearly choked on her wine as Olivia swept through the front door, heels clicking on the marble. Well, don't you look dramatic, Mia sneered. Olivia met her gaze with icy calm. I'll be leaving the house soon. You should enjoy your time here while you can. Nathaniel, home early for once, heard the commotion. He stormed into the foyer, mask slipping. Where the hell have you been? Olivia stood her ground. With my lawyer, with friends, with people who care about me. He glanced at Mrs. Branson, who just smiled sweetly. You're making a mistake, Liv. Olivia's reply was steady. No, Nathaniel. The mistake was trusting you. That ends now. She went upstairs, packed her things, and called a car to take her to a safe hotel in the city. She sent her lawyer the final go-ahead, release the evidence, call the press, and be ready for anything. That night, she stood in front of the full-length hotel mirror, running her hands over her stomach. She spoke aloud to her child. They wanted us broken. They thought we'd disappear. But we're still here, and tomorrow, the world will hear our story. Her phone buzzed, a message from the journalist she'd contacted weeks before. Ready to go live when you are. Are you sure? She replied. I'm sure. It's time. Olivia Lancaster, no longer a ghost, no longer a victim, looked out at the city skyline, lights sparkling like a promise. Tomorrow she would face the world. Tomorrow she would begin again. The next morning the city buzzed with anticipation. Social media sizzled with rumors. Olivia Lancaster, the miracle wife, was making a public appearance for the first time since her so-called funeral. The press, hungry for a spectacle, crowded the steps of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel where the annual philanthropy gala was about to begin. Inside, the ballroom was already packed. Celebrities, business titans, journalists, and politicians milled under the shimmer of 1,000 crystal lights. Nathaniel was there, all sharp tuxedo and fake charm, Mia gleaming on his arm in a champagne gown. Their friends buzzed around them, offering congratulations and snide jokes, unaware of the storm about to break. Olivia arrived fashionably late, every inch a queen. She wore a midnight blue couture gown that hugged her pregnant figure, her hair swept up, sapphire earrings sparkling. Cameras flashed as she entered, the room falling into an electric hush. No one missed the look on Nathaniel's face as he saw her. First shock, then a flash of something like fear. Olivia moved through the crowd with calm confidence, pausing for a few poised photos. She greeted old friends and allies, gathering subtle support. Her lawyer, Miss Fields, and her journalist friend hovered at the edge, ready for the signal. Mrs. Branson, disguised as a catering manager, stood nearby with a subtle nod of encouragement. As the evening wore on, Nathaniel couldn't avoid her forever. He finally approached, trying to project an air of control. Mia trailed behind, her smile tight and eyes darting. Olivia, Nathaniel said, I didn't expect you here. Olivia smiled coolly. You should have. This is my city, too. The MC called for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to recognize Nathaniel Lancaster and his wife for their generosity. Please join us on stage for a special award. The lights brightened as Nathaniel, Mia, and Olivia made their way to the stage. Cameras swiveled, live feeds streaming to millions. The MC handed Olivia the microphone. She took a steady breath, heart pounding, but not with fear. Thank you all for your kindness, Olivia began, her voice clear and steady. I stand before you tonight, not just as Nathaniel Lancaster's wife, or as a survivor, but as someone with the truth. The crowd murmured, a ripple of unease. Nathaniel shifted nervously. Mia squeezed his arm. For months I was told to be silent, to smile for the cameras, to disappear when it suited others, Olivia continued. But silence is no longer an option. Tonight I want to speak for every woman who's been betrayed, manipulated, or abused by those who were supposed to protect them. She turned to the press, her lawyer, her friends. Everything I'm about to say is supported by evidence, recordings, documents, witnesses. She nodded, and Miss Fields handed flash drives to reporters in the front row. Nathaniel tried to grab her arm, voice tight. Olivia, what are you? She stepped away, eyes blazing. Don't interrupt. You and Mia tried to kill me for money. You drugged me, staged my death, and planned to steal everything I built with you. But I survived, and I have proof. Gasps filled the room. Reporters scrambled to check the files. Screens behind the stage lit up. Emails, transcripts, audio files, even surveillance footage showing Nathaniel and Mia plotting together. Mia's face went white, her composure shattering. She tried to flee the stage but was blocked by security. Nathaniel sputtered denials, sweating, desperate. But it was over. The truth was out. I am pressing charges for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy, Olivia declared. My lawyers are already working with the authorities. I want everyone here and watching at home to know I am not a victim. I am a survivor, and my child will be born into a world where the truth matters more than money or power." The applause began quietly, then thundered through the room. Women wept, men cheered. Cameras caught every tear and every triumphant smile. The police arrived before the gala was over, escorting Nathaniel and Mia out in handcuffs. Reporters swarmed Olivia, but she simply smiled, exhausted but finally free. Afterward, Olivia sat alone in the quiet garden behind the hotel, looking up at the stars. Mrs. Branson joined her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did it, dear. You really did it." Olivia let out a long, shaking breath. "For my baby, for everyone who's ever been hurt and silenced." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. There would be battles in court, more headlines, maybe even danger. But tonight, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Her journey from victim to warrior was complete, and as she watched the city lights glitter in the distance, Olivia knew that her story was far from over. News of Nathaniel and Mia's arrest exploded across every screen. Social feeds overflowed with support for Olivia. "Justice for Olivia, she survived, women rise." People from around the world wrote messages, survivors, daughters, mothers, and even men who admitted they'd been bystanders to cruelty. For a moment, Olivia's story was no longer just her own. It became a rallying cry for everyone who'd ever been silenced. In the days that followed, the world shifted. Olivia spent hours giving statements to detectives, working with her lawyers, and coordinating with child protection specialists. She moved into a secure apartment downtown, one with sunlight streaming through wide windows and a nursery she decorated herself. Soft clouds, gentle blues, and splashes of color from her own paintings. Everywhere she went, Olivia was recognized. Some wanted autographs, others simply thanked her for her courage. There were days she felt exhausted by the attention, but every time doubt crept in, she remembered the reason she'd fought so hard. Her child, still safe and growing inside her, a living symbol of her survival. One morning, as she waited for coffee in a quiet cafe, a young woman approached her, tears in her eyes. "I watched your speech at the gala," she whispered. "I left my boyfriend that night. He used to hurt me. I needed you to know you changed my life." Olivia hugged her, both of them crying softly, surrounded by strangers who nodded in understanding. That same week, Olivia testified at a closed-door hearing. Nathaniel and Mia tried to spin their story, but the evidence was overwhelming. Olivia sat tall, never flinching under cross-examination. The truth was undeniable, and justice moved swiftly. Her divorce was finalized. The court awarded her the majority of the estate, not just the house or the money, but full custody of her unborn child and legal protection from Nathaniel and his allies. She donated most of the money to women's shelters and abuse survivors, funding free legal aid and counseling for anyone in need. Her actions started a wave of similar donations across the country. The day her baby was born, a healthy girl she named Grace, Olivia felt a joy deeper than anything she'd known. She held Grace in her arms, breathing in her new daughter's scent, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she felt whole. Olivia painted again, her art now sought after by galleries and collectors. Each canvas told a story, not of pain, but of hope, healing, and fierce rebirth. She began speaking at conferences and on television, sharing her journey honestly, always finishing with a message for those listening. Strength isn't measured by how little you suffer. It's how you rise when the world thinks you're finished. I was betrayed, I was silenced, and I was almost erased. But I found my voice. You can too. No woman, no person should ever believe they are powerless. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are not defined by what others do to you, but by how you choose to live. Women wrote letters from every corner of the world. Some shared stories of heartbreak and struggle. Others just thanked Olivia for showing them that survival and thriving was possible. The news called it a movement. But for Olivia, it was simply the ripple effect of telling the truth. Years passed. Olivia built a foundation to help survivors and young mothers. She and Grace traveled the world together, painting murals in orphanages, building safe houses, and creating spaces where hope was stronger than fear. On the anniversary of her awakening, Olivia hosted a gathering, women and children laughing together in a sunlit garden, voices rising in song. Olivia looked at her daughter, now running through wildflowers, her laughter ringing free, and felt a peace that filled every scar, every memory. As the party faded and dusk settled in, Olivia gave one last speech. Her voice was gentle, but every word carried the force of a promise. There will always be people who try to write your ending. There will always be those who mistake kindness for weakness and silence for consent. But let my story remind you, sometimes the victim rises. Sometimes she fights back, and sometimes she wins. So to every woman listening, never let anyone tell you who you are. Never let betrayal steal your worth. And if you ever wake up in darkness, remember, you are your own light, and your story is not over. As the applause rose, Olivia smiled. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for herself and for Grace. She had lost everything once, but rebuilt it all with truth, courage, and the relentless belief that tomorrow could be better. No more funerals, no more silence, only new beginnings. So the story has ended, and our wonderful friends, are you still here until now? If you are really here with me, I know that something in Olivia's journey must have touched your heart, just as it's touched mine. What this story shows us is that even when life tries to write your ending, even when betrayal cuts deep and loneliness feels endless, you can still rise. You are not defined by what others do to you, but by how you choose to fight back and build your life again. Remember this quote from the wisdom of heterodoxism. Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed, it means the damage no longer controls our lives. Like Olivia, you can find your voice, your strength, and your light, no matter how dark it seems. If you felt something real in this story, I invite you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and comment below about the moment that moved you most. Maybe your words will help someone else find hope. Remember, your story isn't over yet, and you're never as alone as you think.